В общем, я хотела все время работать в Бессоне. Я хотела
Нет.
Okay. Interesting. What's your largest company export?
Largest, one of the largest microprinting use projector computer-based content 3-in-1.
Which
Michael Hobson. He's with Bottle. Actually, we started just most of our company is local because we just sold to local company. But about 10% of our company is or 40.
Друзья, вопрос, нужно переводить на английский, на русский или нет? Точно нет?
Подожди, с английского на русский, или с русского на английский, или с какого на какой?
I'm gonna speak very slow English.
На испанский.
Давайте будешь спрашивать что-нибудь. Да это как-то неудобно будет.
Okay, guys, I think we should start. I want to introduce Florian. Florian is CEO of LaModa. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here in Marbella at Invest Weekend. All these guys here in the audience, late stage VCs, early stage VCs, some entrepreneurs, but all of these guys are really cool. And I hope this will be an open discussion where everybody can ask any questions that they really want. So, Florian.
Well, first of all, thanks for the invite, Max, and I mean, great meeting all of you guys. Sorry, my Russian is really like poor, so I think English is the only way to give you an interesting insight in what we've basically built in the last 8.5 years in Russia. Maybe as a quick introduction, what I'm basically doing. So we started LaModa, as I said, 8.5 years ago. We got some, well, I think a decent amount of funding in the beginning from guys like Kinnevik, Rocket Internet, Tengelmann, which is a big retailer, and the VC arm of this guy. So we got a fairly decent amount of money and built it, I would say, fairly quickly. Then I think, built it for some time. At some point, I started to do some angel investments myself, typically with, some VCs. With Igor, we had one co-investment, which we, I think, both booked as our quickest flop.
So we should do next one together.
Yeah, but I think it's also one of the learnings to, when things are pretty clearly not working out, that you exit quickly and stop the bleeding, and that's what we actually did that time. So I basically then invested in maybe 8 to 10 typically startups, and then meanwhile scaled LaModa further, and also started to join a bigger retailer as a director in the supervisory board, and now I'm looking kind of a little bit beyond fashion. And I think one of the messages I wanted to get across is that regardless of what stage your company is in and how old, I think one of the things that is always, it's a key success factor and actually always a pain is people. Whether you're in a small company where I'm actively involved, where we have a team of 20, or LaModa we have 7,000 people now, or Magnit with like 300,000, it's always the same thing.
7,000 in Moscow or across?
It's across Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Ukraine, but most of we have like 6,000 I think in Russia. But it's anyway, regardless how big the company is, it's always the same thing. People are the key kind of, well, both success factor but also bottleneck. I can tell you a little bit more about it, how we kind of approached it, or what my personal approach is. I think that's a good overview of what I'm basically doing. So I'm not having a VC myself. I'm doing typically rather small tickets in things that I understand. Now to the history of Lamoda. So I think there were a couple of phases that we went through. First was this kind of cowboy phase where it started in end of 10, early 2011, where the only goal was to get things going. We had the luxury of 10 million plus funding, so we could burn quite a little bit, and we did it actually. It wasn't very efficient, but within 6 to 7 months, we basically built a product that was actually better than what was existing on the market. At that time was Zapato and then Kubivip, so we were quickly surpassing them. Then there was a phase when we started to build a more sustainable infrastructure, operational infrastructure and customer experience, because I think one of the particularities about Russian e-commerce is that you really need to invest into the operational infrastructure, the tech infrastructure. It's not as simple of a plug and play as you have in some of the European or in the US market, where you have a partner for everything and you can just focus on, your consumer proposition. So that was the second phase where we invested a lot in own warehousing, own delivery, own call centers, etc. And that's why we also have so many people today, right? Because we are quite integrated. Then after that came a phase, because that cost a lot of money, and we had to raise a lot. Luckily, we had shareholders who were committed kind of for the long run. So, however, we burnt a lot of money at that time, and the next phase was building sustainable economics. So while I think you can run, high burn rates for some time, you got to show definitely that there's a systematic. That's obvious for all of you guys investing yourself, but it was for us also obvious, but not that easy to do, to build an economically viable model where you basically show very strong unit economics, which is kind of the main thing we're looking at, and also the possibility to scale so that you're actually scaling away a fixed cost, right? So that was, I think, the kind of third phase. We managed that very well, and I think then we entered around 2 years ago. We entered into the next phase where we also adjusted the governance a little bit and the leadership. So we made this a lot more sustainable. I don't know if you're aware, but if you know, but I was one of 4 co-founders, all German guys, without any kind of history in Russia.
And why start in Russia?
I will tell that in a moment.
Russian
My wife is coming in a moment. So yes.
I already know your history.
So it wasn't the reason to come to Russia, but definitely a reason to stay. So I can say that. No, so we basically after 6 years of being a co-founder structure, where basically, well, maybe 2 main guys plus a tech guy, where we had like all our responsibilities. We were very fast because a lot of people had access to a founder, so that was in a way very good for the first couple of years. But at some point, when I think that time we had like almost 5,000 people already, it just wasn't the best possible org structure. So we changed that. 2 of my co-founders actually phased out. They focused on another startup that we built together, and so we built a kind of more straightforward CEO structure, and also changed a lot of other things in the governance. We're extremely, I would say, well-run company for a Russian company of that size, simply because we also had the aim to go IPO with our. Meanwhile we rolled up all our shares in a holding company, and so that holding company was supposed to go IPO. So for that also we adjusted all the kind of governance. So everything that you kind of need to have in place to be IPO ready, we had in place, like we put in place 2 years ago basically. So that was the fourth or fifth phase. I stopped counting, and and then the current phase we are in is basically differentiating our strategy, our positioning, and making the ground for future growth. So what I think you're all aware of is that in Russian e-com it's a pretty interesting situation. Unlike in let's say Europe, take Germany or Spain. I'm not so much aware, but I mean take France maybe as a neighboring country. In France you have 4 or 5 fashion players, which are all like, I don't know, around 1 billion or 1.5 billion, and they're all doing fine. And there's one general merchandise player, basically Amazon. In Russia it's the other way around. There are like 4 or 5 players who try to be the #1 general merchandise player, and there's now only one fashion platform. So we basically use the time to refocus ourselves on the fashionability, to differentiate ourselves from all the stuff that you can anyway buy on the Amazon type of platform. Because I mean, one thing I definitely learned from one of our shareholders who made his experience. I mean, you shouldn't compete with Chinese money. I think that is not a good idea. They have typically deeper pockets, and also we didn't want to. We realized we cannot really compete with a Russian company that is kind of run grayish, right? So where they cut corners everywhere and could kind of basically deliver very cheap items that for us would be loss-making. So we decided to kind of elevate a little bit the positioning, and so that's what we are actually currently doing. Maybe to sum up the kind of, let's say, presentation part, now Lamoda is about 7,000 people. We're making this year around $500 million euros, a bit more in terms of net revenues. We are running probably about 25% growth, and have 3,000 brands, I would say, of which many of them are exclusive. So I mean, we are the only fashion platform in the world actually selling Calzedonia. We're running Inditex brands exclusively. We're having a lot of lines of big brands like Nike exclusively. So I mean that was kind of our main push in the last 1.5 to 2 years to build an offering on the product side, and also on the assortment side, and also on the experience that is different from general merchandise. So I think that's probably kind of where we are. I think last point on where are we going?
Yes.
Should I? So it is time to further push growth. I mean, it's we have in fashion maybe 7.5 to 10%, depending on the estimates that you want to believe in, fashion online. So it's pretty low when you compare it to the West or to China, of course. So there's a lot of growth coming, and we definitely want to re-accelerate growth. And I think to do that, you got to have a economic machine that works. So that's what I initially said was something we focus a lot on. So we don't want to burn money. So I mean, unlike an Ozon or someone, right? I mean, we're not really burning cash on operations, and this is the basis for re-acceleration of growth. So that's, I think, also one of the fundamental beliefs that I have, that it's good to burn some money for some time, but it needs to be really contained. You need to really have a very solid path to run a profitable, structurally profitable business, and then you can kind of invest a little bit in growth, in capex infrastructure where needed, but with a very clear understanding of where you're going to end up.
Do you have plans to scale somewhere outside of CIS to Eastern Europe or Central Europe?
I just read yesterday that, and before I knew that Wildberries wants to do something in Europe. To be honest, I don't think these things are too relevant for us. Zalando is extremely strong in 17 or 18 countries, I guess. You have all the French platforms. You have a couple platforms here, I guess. I think the the growth potential in Russia itself, or in CIS itself, is you know, huge. As I said, 7% versus say 25-30% that you're going to have in these markets. So I think it would be quite stupid to believe that you can beat companies like Zalando, and I mean also guys like Amazon, who are kind of very strong everywhere, selling at least basic apparel, not really fashionable stuff. So I think it would be a super risky approach, and I mean, we have enough to do in Russia.
Oh, that's cool. Now, what is the main difference from your perspective working in Germany and in Russia? You spend a lot of time traveling and working around the world, and right now for the last 8 years you're here in Moscow.
Yeah.
What's the main difference in working with people, hiring people, in business culture?
I mean, due to the holding company, which we brought public in basically this year, I'm having exposure to kind of, well, it was at some time 25 countries. Now we're still having 17 or 18 countries. So I do understand actually probably more how it is to run similar business in Brazil or in I don't know, in Singapore or in Australia than in Germany, because I haven't worked in Germany. Well, we have a small operation in Germany, but it's not. No, I don't spend so much time there. I think, generally speaking, the talent situation is a little tougher in Russia. I would say you have better technology. I would say education. However, there's also, I mean, Russia is one of the well, I think the only country next to US and China, which has their own, you know, tech giants, and with Mail and Yandex, and I mean, Sberbank wants to kind of join that group as well. And so there's a huge, although there's great education and great talent, it is extremely competitive. So cost-wise, and I mean, all the kind of, you know, environment, etc., that you need to build to attract kind of the best people is a challenge. And then quite often the greatest tech people, they can anyway work wherever they want, right? And I mean, I don't know, who of you is living outside of Russia? Probably most of you. I mean, so
Some of them.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have the dream to not live in Russia, right? So
No,
I don't understand. I totally.
But I can't.
No, it's,
A lot of people can.
no, I won't, but okay, like, it's difficult for my business, for example.
I mean, there are good reasons to, at least depending on the business, to anyway move out, but leave Russia. But I mean, I think the country is great and actually offers great lifestyle. If you're okay with you know, some adverse weather conditions, and if you're fine with the worst traffic in the world, or almost the worst. No, I think, but many people have the desire to kind of, you know, to live and work in the US, or, you know, somewhere in Asia and in Australia. So I think you've got to really build something amazing. It's just, you know, while in Germany, I mean, you build a company and offer an interesting task, and typically you get people who are fine with it, right? So you don't need to really fight for it. And in Russia, you have to really fight for it. That's for the tech side. For non-tech, I think it's a lot worse, because there is not even that kind of great school and great experience. There's not a really good, I would say, environment. I mean, if you take logistics, I mean, we try to get logistics services outsourced, complete failure. Then we did it ourselves. We tried to hire logistics people, didn't work, so we ended up building logistics with McKinsey people, which sounds very odd, but that kind of was the best way actually to do it. It turned out to be amazing, because that is one of our great strengths now. I mean, we're having a super strong customer experience and also good B2B business now, offering our platform to brands because of that kind of investment in logistics. But it was very painful. So logistics was one area. Online marketing, it's another area where, in particular in the earlier years, there was no one. I mean, we had to basically educate all the people ourselves. Now that has improved a little bit as kind of digital marketing became, you know, widespread and a need for pretty much everybody. It was very, very painful. So I think that, in summary, I think is maybe the biggest difference, that the talent situation is a bit more tough.
Really? I thought that in Russia it's much easier to hire tech people than.
It's like for tech, it's probably easier to find good people, and but you need to really also put a great, need to build a great environment for them, which we managed. I mean, we now have around 340, well, maybe now 320, and by end of the year 340 as a plan, and a very decent kind of turnover and very high quality. But it took us a long, long time to build that.
And do you have any problems with hiring top managers, or just this similar?
I said, I mean, regardless which size, right? I mean, my wife just joined. Hi. She has a small company where we have the same issues to find great people. We have in Lamoda, of course, the challenge to find amazing people, and in Magnit we have the same, right? I mean, we have wherever you're. I mean, finding really, really good people is I think is tough. There are a lot of people who look good on paper, right? I mean, I have a couple of funny anecdotes how other people hired people and failed because they just looked at what people put in their CVs, and I think that is really what you can't do, right? So you need to really have a very huge effort in getting good analytics on candidates.
And what takes most time for you working in Lamoda? So what's the biggest issue? Or
as I said, it's a lot about building teams, obviously. Then also it's a lot about lining up the strategy, and we basically invested a lot in not only building a new strategy, but also kind of pushing that through to the kind of very last person, almost, right, in the hierarchy. So we used OKRs. I don't know if you guys heard about it, but it's like
it was my question. What kind of management frames do you have?
We switched to OKRs, and it's just amazing. I mean, that really for us changed things big time. Because I mean, it's basically well, it's not. I don't know, for those who don't know it. I mean, the key is that you break down your strategy. You have strategic pillars, and then you build objectives that help to make the strategy work. And for each objective, you typically build 5 key results, and everything is known everywhere. So every employee knows about it. I mean, there are potentially some confidential things. Then you say X, X, Y, Y, whatever, right? So you can hide maybe some details, but everyone in the company knows where the journey is going to. And as you have a big company, that becomes absolutely, key to success. We always thought we had clear, we actually had always a clear strategy, but it was clear to the management team, and not always clear to, everybody else. And I think that really led to less than perfect, or less than most possible efficiency in terms of coordination. So as you can't work in e-commerce, at least, you can't work in simple silos. Everything is kind of interconnected. It's extremely important that everyone knows exactly what's going on. And so you break even down this kind of OKRs, you go down all the levels. I mean, for us, we have on every individual, I would say on the headquarter level, has his or her own OKRs. That changed things like, it's like day and night difference. So that takes some time to kind of, to implement that and to go through that.
What kind of management system, ERP, are you using to support OKRs?
What kind of, you mean ERP system?
Yeah.
That is, to be honest, it's totally unrelated to the OKRs. I mean, we use, we have a lot of self-built systems. As a financial ERP, we have Axapta, one of the largest, actually the head of Microsoft last week visited us and asked for a meeting because we have one of the largest installations of Axapta in Russia. And so we're quite happy with that, although it was painful. But we're happy that we didn't do SAP, as we anyway had to adjust things a lot to the needs of e-commerce. It's just very different from physical retail. Yeah, so that's, however, totally unrelated to the OKRs we are running.
Are you using Rag, Slack?
Yeah, they're all, yes, both actually.
How you use it for which department?
It's typically the marketing teams are using Rike, the tech teams are on Slack. Well, where it kind of overlaps, like on product, which we have connected to marketing in our case. I mean, they're also on Slack. There's very kind of detailed tracking based on Jira, which just is super, I think, widespread and easy to use for most of the tech people, and that I think is also like important. I think we aiming to simplify things a little bit and harmonize things so that the whole company is a bit more, let's say, unified in terms of tools.
What about Mira?
Mira.
Do you use Miro? No, real time.
You don't know about Mira?
Tell me.
Real time or
Mira platform, it's emergent. It's really for distributed teams to organize everything.
It's not for planning, it's for team.
No, it's for everything because it is connected to Jira, connected to Slack, connected to everything.
Yeah.
It's like endless whiteboard.
Okay.
It's all connected. It's really emergent.
I haven't looked into this myself.
yeah, they're kind of cool. They raised first from Altair and then they raised 25 million from Axel Partners, right?
No, they got 25 million.
25, right? Yeah. So they're kind
Okay.
of cool.
I'll
No,
check
but
out.
they're really growing
Like great, they have
The-
customers
the-
in all
the
companies
most-
in the States.
Yeah.
And speaking about the strategy, do you have any strategy working with the startups, with entrepreneurs, or inside of Lamoda?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not asking about angel investment right now.
Yeah, I mean, the overall strategy is a further differentiation from general merchandise platforms. So one key to that is we call it indie tools, like it's inspiration and discovery. So you can imagine, like in fashion, that's super important. We have recently, for example, implemented a tool from a Belarusian startup to kind of have virtual try-on of shoes on your legs. It's quite funny. And
Wanna buy?
Is it Banner?
yeah.
Yeah, you bought this company or just?
No. Unfortunately not.
But what do you think about them?
I mean, the tool works well.
They came for me for investment, but they don't understand use case.
No, I like them a lot. However, we haven't looked at them as an investment target because I mean, ultimately we are happy with integration. Actually, we don't need to necessarily own the company. But in this kind of direction, we're looking at a couple of other startups. Actually, recently one startup visited us that is, I don't know, doing tools for cosmetics, for improved cosmetics use. So they kind of take your photos and then try to customize the.
What?
No, they're a different one.
It's also your portfolio.
No, it's also.
I think they're called
Both
like,
of them are not mine.
No,
But
it's
I
like
like from Belarus. But
no, open phase, I think they call it. Like very early stage. I mean, way too early stage to invest for us. But I mean, like interesting concepts where then sometimes we are like just waiting for the product to develop and then implement it, integrate it. And sometimes we're just also, to be honest, I mean, we're obviously taking ideas and we have I think I told you we have like 35 or 37 people in our R&D team, so like data scientists and data engineers, which then build a lot of these things. So we build these things ourselves from time to time. So I think we have a hybrid strategy. I think in a way my approach to kind of make or buy is very simple. I mean, whenever there's someone who can do something better than us, let's buy it. So we can focus all our resources, which are always scarce and they're always not enough, right? So that we can focus our resources on what is really needed to do ourselves. So where people can't help us.
The funny thing, you mentioned Belarusian startup. The investor of the startup was here yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, because he lives here in Gibraltar.
Of Wannabe?
They're good. I mean, looks like a good product. We're happy so far, but I mean, these things can, of course, they can fly or they can die. I mean, that technology works doesn't mean it's a good business model, right? So
That's true. Michael?
And what is your responsibility in Lamoda? How you share responsibilities with another co-founder?
Now I'm the basically CEO, so the other co-founders, two left, and the one guy who is still with me is focusing on some brand management, so some brand relationships, and you know, some office administration.
How many hours do you spend for Lamoda weekly?
I don't know.
It was your question, meeting.
Maybe Katja, you know. Hmm? Too much.
24 hours every day?
30 hours, so I don't know.
If not physically, but mentally.
Yeah, mentally definitely. I mean, you're 24/7, you know, on it. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, it's I have a great team now, which is like, as I said, it was painful to build, but it's amazing now, and that kind of really helps me also to kind of focus not on day-to-day things, you know, for most of the time. So, I mean, like the last couple of days I was not doing much. So today I wasn't doing much. So
And
it's
that's
not
cool,
great.
but-
I'm not.
but
I mean,
speaking about Lamoda.
the first years were crazy. I mean, we literally slept kind of in the office, and I think that is what I can also tell every investor. It's my opinion. When you have if you want to invest, I would always look at, you know, the drive the team has, and if you have founders or like you know, yeah, founder teams who believe you can do it with 10, 12 hours a day, I mean, it's just typically not working. So I respect when people manage great things with 4 hours a day or something, or 4 hours a week, as some famous books suggest. But in majority of cases, it's just, you know, crazy hours you need to push.
That's cool. And
In the beginning.
You also mentioned that you did have 7,000 people inside of a company. And in Silicon Valley, you also mentioned Reich. Andrew Filov is a good friend of mine. He spends a lot of time with the team.
Mhm.
And right now, the team is close to 1,000 people. Just to share his vision, how
Yeah.
where the company is going. It's like
Yeah.
meetings for almost everybody. And the
Yeah.
same happens in Uber, also at Lyft.
Yeah.
It's not very common in Russia. Do you speak with all the people from the company?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any possibility to ask any question to you and to get
Yeah.
an answer? So.
I mean, there are several formats. One that's it's maybe not very multi-directional, but I mean, I'm writing every Monday kind of a personal letter to the whole company, which everyone
You
receives.
write it by yourself?
I'm writing that typically myself. I mean, there's of course input and someone like
Yes.
is, you know, cleaning up things, but that is one thing. Then there's Q&A. There's a possibility to share questions, which we then publicly answer. So we have quarterly, like, kind of all hands meetings. We call it management updates, but at some point we decided everyone who believes he should be part of management update can join. So it's not limited to management, but I mean, whoever wants to join joins. I think it's a great opportunity for people to, I mean, to show that that they have ambitions and that they're interested in the company development. So that we're doing on a quarterly basis, where then like all kind of questions, sometimes really stupid questions, sometimes big questions are all answered. I mean, they're like, as you can imagine, when you allow everybody to ask questions, I mean, there's sometimes funny things like, I don't know, why did we change the cookies from X to Y, right, in the kitchen, or these kind of things. And sometimes big strategic questions. So I think we address all of that very transparently. Then I have, on a monthly basis, kind of a lunch, CEO lunch as we call it, and I mean pretty much. So we organize it a bit by areas, so that, you know, that we make sure every area has a chance to send their people. And there's we do it now for a year, so I haven't seen obviously everybody, but that is definitely something that helps me to kind of, you know, be visible, and also myself get like direct feedback from, I don't know, 10, 15 people at a time. And now we are having introduced, actually the funny thing is, it's kind of random coffee breaks. So you basically sign up and then you kind of randomly are assigned with another colleague for a coffee. And all management participates there as well. So that just started, so I haven't had a coffee yet, but so theoretically you can randomly meet anyone in the company. Like, so it's quite fun, and that was piloted in the tech division, and now we are rolling that out actually everywhere. So I mean, we're very open. We have very open culture. So I think it should be easy for people to speak to me and my team as well.
It's cool. And do you have stock options for the personnel or
Fast?
stock options like?
Yeah, we have. I mean,
for everybody or
no,
for the top one?
no. I mean, unfortunately, we're not in Silicon Valley, where I think you have a lot bigger pools available. But we have management and wider management incentivized, and so I think that it's okay. I mean, could be better, could be a wider pool. I'd like to have everyone, you know, in the program, but it's simply not possible with the structure we're having.
And how many people have option pool totally? 200.
No, it is going to be 100 and maybe 120 maybe.
That's anyway a lot. Michael, you had a question?
Yeah. What kind of books was most cause the maximum impact for yourself?
I can tell you one book that definitely was the most inspiring book I've read. It was the Shoe Dog. It's the story about Nike. And what I liked so much about it, that it was such an honest description of like how the journey went, and was so much about luck that Nike is today the company it is. It was, I mean, they failed almost 10 times. Yeah, so they were kind of all the time close to bankruptcy. I mean, there was obviously a lot of drive, in particular in the early days from key people, which I think also reminded me a lot of Lamoda, and there were a lot of similarities. Not that we went 10 times bankrupt, but almost, but very many similarities, and I think was one of the very few books which were like really honest about the amount of luck you need and the amount of coincidences that it takes to build such a company. I mean, it's...
Do you plan to write a book?
No.
Okay.
No, not yet.
Okay. You also told me a couple of weeks before that you do have your own portfolio of startups. You invest in different regions of the world. Could you tell a bit more about the companies you invested? What those investment thesis you do have?
Yeah. Yeah, there are a couple. I think the general idea, which I also had to learn the hard way, is to invest in things that you really understand. So, as we earlier said, like with Igor, we invested in something that was not that we were not kind of industry experts, and we also were not we didn't know the team too well, and I think that was one of the things I wouldn't repeat. So you can maybe, you know,
we also rely on somebody who
yes,
presented us,
yes,
which was not true, so it was.
That's another thing, but regardless of that part of the story, I think you can have a difficult business model if the team is super strong, or you have a super simple business model that you really know by heart, and you know the team is kind of okay-ish, doesn't need to be rock stars. It can also work. But if you have something really complicated and innovative and new, and then a team that is not known to you, I think that's a bad combination. So that I wouldn't repeat. Then yeah. So what am I invested in right now? So quite actively, as actually a company of my wife Katja. She can tell more if you want. It's basically a product-based business. So it's fashion jewelry. And the idea was to create a brand that is selling direct to consumer and also on platforms, so marketplaces. We started that in Russia, and now we basically internationalizing, so already live in Germany, and a couple other European countries are coming. And I think that's a great thing because, I mean, that's an industry we very much know, so it's something like very, very, very close to us, and then obviously the team is amazing, and the other thing which I like is, you know, building something, piloting something in Russia, and then once it works, you can kind of export. I think that's I mean, and not only for product businesses, I think the same applies for services as well, or software businesses. I think it's a great thing to do, because I mean, building a kind of Russian-only business, I mean, although the market is amazing and I love it to kind of serve the Russian market and the Russian consumer, exits are obviously,
No,
can take a long time. I mean, you just need to be ready to kind of hold on for very, very long. So that's why I would say, if you have something that kind of works out in Russia and you can export, I think it's great. I mean, it gives you a lot more opportunities, not only on the kind of business itself, but also on the exit. Then I was an early investor in Doc Plus. It's actually an interesting business, which we kind of pivoted a little bit. It was starting as a home service for doctor visits, basically. However, it is extremely painful to educate the Russian, can you say consumer, the Russian patients, to kind of make use of that. So we kind of reducing that, and we actually started 2 years ago to build basically an AI-based tech company, which is helping to solve a lot of healthcare challenges. So helping ultimately insurances to kind of have kind of gatekeeping functionality in their processes. It helps at some point doctors to diagnose better. So there are a lot of, I would say, interesting applications which are of huge relevance in most of the markets. And here also we started that in Russia, and now we are launching in Germany hopefully soon.
Why always Germany? You have good network. Now, I understand that you're from Germany, but you're not living there for years, and probably you're not thinking on a German language now, right?
Yeah, not usually.
Yeah.
Unless
Germany is
it's a huge market.
Best market.
Exactly.
In Europe, yeah.
It's just the best market, and you have, of course, I have a best network there, right? So that's why
you just can help companies to raise more or get more directly to the customer.
Like for Exclaim, the fashion company, we basically had access to all the founders of the fashion platforms in Germany. So I mean, that kind of these things just work out a lot faster. Yeah. So and for the doc business, kind of similar things. So we can help there a lot better.
You also have Foodfox.
Yeah, Foodfox, which we then exited to Yandex. There was an interesting case because we kind of were founding investors. Was two ex-Lamoda guys who built it.
Oh really? I never knew that.
They basically came to us and they said, we want to build Instacart. And we said, sorry,
no.
Don't do that. Then we do with someone else. But if you want to build Deliveroo, then we're in. And they said, okay. So they built the Deliveroo business. And to be fair, they thought about it. They didn't change their mind in one meeting, but so they fortunately changed their mind, and then we built that. It was an amazing time, actually. I really liked it. And the service just actually changed my life as a consumer. I mean, I started to get proper food every day in the office, so that was amazing. No, and at some point it was just really difficult, right? Because Mail obviously started to also invest into the delivery business next to aggregation, and they just burned like money on. I mean, they subsidized food big time, so actually you could eat for free almost, right? At certain times.
And you still can eat for free in some restaurants and Delivery Club, and this is so strange for me in their business model.
Exactly. I mean, it is. To be honest, it's one of the things I'm not 100% sure about. Well, I think so. It would be like, you know, continue to run discounts in Lamoda, like of, I don't know, 40% in full price season, or spending 5,000 ruble customer acquisition costs, or these kind of things, right? Which we did in the very beginning just to get some traction. But I think it's nothing I would run for forever, and I don't really see the path to profit in that kind of in the food delivery business. It's really difficult to achieve that. It's a little bit a bet, I think, that someone finds the key to that profitability in the future. The same actually you have in grocery delivery, right? I mean, that is actually nowhere in the world really profitable, because the kind of picking, the kind of delivery is so expensive, but no one wants to lose that kind of opportunity. Everyone wants to be in that market, and that's why everyone tries to deliver groceries, which
and actually Yandex launched grocery deliveries on FoodFox platform like a month or two ago. The guy from Medusa launched the service in Moscow.
As I said, I mean, at some point it will work, but you need to be ready to invest a lot of money for an unknown amount of years. If you're ready to do that, I think it's fine. But that then can be a huge opportunity.
And you do have a lot of companies in your portfolio. How do you manage them, or you just?
A lot of them, I mean, to be honest,
time to time.
A few I'm actively involved in, like maybe 2.5, and most of them more like it's quite passive actually, because there's only so much time, and unlike you, I'm not a professional investor.
There are not so many professional investors. There is
I
like.
have a question.
No
question.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for the story. What is the Lamoda valuation for now? What's your plan for the next 5 years?
Valuation, I mean, it's we don't have a Lamoda valuation as we're part of Global Fashion Group, and I think it's if you would exit, if you would sell the company, I mean, as there are some people trying to buy out Lamoda. There are a couple of €100 million that you would kind of get for it, but it's not the time where I think right now where you can say, I don't know, I get $1 billion or something, right? And these multiples did exist. Actually, when you look at Zalando multiples, they were kind of close to 2x, above 2x, not a long time ago. However, I think in Russia right now you wouldn't kind of get that money. But anyway, it's not at the moment not on the table because we're part of a group which covers several developing markets, and we're okay with that.
Florian, what's your main driver when you invest in startup? I mean, you want to increase your money, or it's just fun, or you're looking for something new? What is your passion?
It's definitely both. I mean, I don't want to invest in something that I don't like. Actually, I would even use that principle if I invest in public stock, right? I mean, I know Tesla, for example, I think it's a great idea, but it's a shit car, so I wouldn't buy it, right? I mean,
really,
coming from a German,
I think the same. That Tesla is
it is a shit car. I mean, they just have, I mean, the quality and everything. So when they fix it, maybe I like it, right? So I mean, I don't know, but then other, like, I don't know, the business model of Alibaba is so strong. I mean, I would buy Alibaba stocks, right? Because I think it's like just something that can't really fail. In the long run, it will just create amazing value. So I think I need to like the service or the product. I think that's also true for then my private investments. And obviously there need to be possibility to kind of get good upside, right? So, but it's not that I would say that I would bet on very short-term kind of exits. I think that's there. Maybe it's just my experience, but there are very few kind of cases where you get fast exits executed well. So I'm typically fine if that takes some a couple of years.
Yeah, I have a question about the early stage of Lamoda. Can you tell us a little bit how it was, the structure with Rocket Internet? Were you part of Rocket? And did they hire you and they said, hey, we have this business model, go and build it there? Or was it your idea? Were you just investors?
Yeah, it was the second kind of way. So luckily, because I mean, there are two ways really. I think nowadays Rocket is a lot more investing into existing companies rather than building themselves. But I think in the past, most of the companies were like global efforts where they said, okay, we want to do food delivery, and then they kind of really hired people and sent them in countries. Yeah. And that was very much centered, centralized. Kind of, they had tech teams in Berlin and management there. And I mean, I saw some of these companies coming and going, and what really, I think, what you can summarize. Across these kind of centralized companies, what was typically the problem, I mean, you didn't have teams. And it was like, I mean, you cannot hire founder teams. It's just impossible. They need to hire themselves. They need to find themselves, and I think we were lucky that we did it this way around, and obviously Rocket was very keen. Rocket was very keen to roll out kind of the Zalando story in more countries. So, but we basically, collected our team and then collected the money. I would say I wouldn't do it exactly the same way again, because I think also Oliver was very smart in diluting us. I would say too much, but still I have no regrets. It was still a good kind of model because it gave us obviously a lot of speed and a lot of, it kept the downside, right, risk. So it was, I think, very helpful. But yeah, now I probably would run it even kind of with less dependency or on someone like Oliver or whoever is the main investor who kind of ultimately then also dictates the terms too much, right?
Yeah. Did you know each other before, or did you know each other at Rocket?
Actually, it was a funny story. His brother Alex wanted to. He called me actually when I was actually studying. I took a break from my consulting job and I was studying in the US, and I was focused on health systems, building better health systems. It was like all what I wanted to do, and. He called me and said, "Look, Florian, we heard you're an amazing guy. Can you just join us? We have this Zalando business. We sell shoes online." It was 2008. They just put money into Zalando, and I was like, "Shoes online? I don't know." Sorry. I heard about you guys. You seem to be they just exited this eBay and stuff. So they made a couple $100 million with this ringtone things. And so thanks. Honored speaking to you, but no. And a year later, but Alex Zamber is the smartest of the brothers. However, he's also not the most pushy, right? So he accepts a no. And then a year later, Oliver, I met Oliver after I was speaking to my co-founder Niels, and I had definitely still some doubts about not so much the business model, but to be honest, about Russia as well. Because there were other potentially bigger countries around as well, and Oliver was one of the guys who definitely said, "Guys, you need to do it in Russia, do it basically tomorrow, screw McKinsey, whatever, just run away, all this kind of thing." So he doesn't accept a no, and he was very convincing. So yeah, that was kind of my kind of story with them.
And what's your personal strategy? Do you plan to spend another 10 years in Lamoda, or what you're willing to do?
I don't know. I don't know. I once had an idea when I came to Russia. We all had the idea to very quickly exit the business, right? Say
and then leave Russia, right?
And then build it, make millions, and leave in 1.5 years, right? So we're still there. I'm still there after 8.5 years. So apparently this idea didn't work out. It's not actually. I'm very happy that it didn't work out because I think I gained a lot from staying there, and for also building the company in that way, because it was a quite unique opportunity to build a company of that size and of that relevance. So I'm very happy to be part of that still, and I don't have any concrete plans, to be honest. Would I do the same thing in 10 years? I don't mean, if I have to bet, probably not, right? But there are no other plans, to be also transparent.
But you definitely should learn kitesurfing. There are a bunch of the guys here in Dordos who do kitesurfing a lot.
Yeah, as I told you when we met,
this is one of the best activities you can find.
I'd really love to.
Yeah.
Good.
And the last question: what kind of media do you read every day? What kind of media would you recommend to keep updated with the tech business, media, fashion, all this kind of stuff?
Quite frankly, I'm now totally I'm bombarded with all the retail news. Also, given my Magnet exposure there, I'm reading all this retail blogs and whatever, more than real kind of tech stuff. I think when it comes to tech, probably you guys know a lot better. So I think for the last 2 years, I think I'm really focused on retail.
And the last question about Magnet, I forgot to ask about that. What is it like to work on the board of Russia-founded company with the Russian directors and the company which
And this is one of the things that I really enjoy because it's a great wheel to spin, right? So it's said 300,000 people, 20 billion in turnover. Still, if you look at it globally, I mean, one of the best profit margins that you can have in retail. I mean, it's with around 7%, a lot higher than, you know, I mean, German retailers would kind of die for it. I mean, they would.
For 7%? And
Yeah.
why nobody from Germany is trying to buy Magnet?
Well, I think there is not so much appetite for Russian companies, generally speaking. I mean, it's a public company, right? So I mean, they could invest. I think there are maybe 5% of the floated shares are in the hands of European investors. The majority is rather US, I think US based. And no, it's fun and it's for me something new. Well, it was new. I think after half a year or 4 months or something, I feel like I'm in there forever. So it eats you, but it's fun.
Okay.
A lot to learn.
Guys, I don't have any questions left, so
I have one final question.
okay.
Talking about management stuff, what kind of trainings can you recommend for your top management? What was the most working school? I mean, we know Skolkovo, we know Stanford. What kind of trainings can you recommend to us?
I mean, we're not the kind of company who's sending people for MBAs, right? I mean, and I don't believe in the Skolkovo MBA. I mean, don't want to offend anyone if, I don't know if someone is doing that.
I don't believe in any MBA.
Me too. I actually think it's a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
And I mean, however, we actually we had a lot of people who went to Stanford, to Harvard, and to whatever other US schools. So as many Russians, as we earlier discussed, right, dream to kind of do that. However, I mean, what we're doing is we have a lot of internal trainings. I mean, or self-organized trainings. I think the most relevant one that we recently had was team roles. So basically, you look at there's a structured way, and there's some proper assessment and diagnostics, which external people did for us, and you basically look at the roles that every person in your team has, and you kind of then try to kind of fill the puzzle, right? So I mean, you need, for example, you need not only innovation kind of people, right? People who create ideas all the time, or like problem solving. I mean, you need to also have a certain share of executors, as an example. And I mean, we realized that we, at some point, that we had, because we have, I think, a very smart team, but the focus of many people was on creating new ideas. And so we definitely had to address that. So we looked, when we added more people to the team, we usually looked for kind of complementary capabilities. So that was something we could fix with external hirings or with new hirings. And then of course you can also direct training, right? So if you say there is some people need more skills on execution, then you can help them with particular training. So I think that team roles was by far the best training we did.
I heard that any business problem is, first of all, it's HR problem. To solve any business problem, you need to find where your people must be replaced.
Yes, I mean, you asked me earlier like how much time I spend on what in the company, and I think probably, I mean, people-related things are number one. Definitely, I mean, I know what share, but probably like 40–50% are somewhat kind of people-related, not content-related so much. So yeah, can only agree with you. Okay.
About the growth, for example, Amazon have a lot of growth team. They every day trying to prove about 1,000 hypotheses. For example, Avito have 50 growth teams, and every team every month prove 4 or 5 hypotheses, and all Avito have 200 hypotheses every month.
Yeah.
What about your structure and the amount of hypotheses? Maybe you have some growth team and pool of hypotheses. How many hypotheses every month you trying to prove?
We don't have a 60% net margin or something, right? That business like Avito has, or so I think we definitely have to be more creative about that. So I don't think we build separate teams, but what we're doing is we're having a philosophy actually to be very agile, and I mean also it's reflected in the org structure, and our product teams, which are ultimately you know maybe the kind of first team that is building new solutions for consumers. They are like I can't tell you how many things they're testing on a kind of monthly basis, but smaller things, probably also in the range of, I don't know, like 20, 30 hypotheses, which we can of course expand with more resources, but I think also when it comes to what you then in the end can implement, there's also a limit, right? So in a way it's a funnel, and if I create like tons of ideas that ultimately I have no people to implement it for, then it's not the right investment. So I think we balance it kind of fine, and we're testing very a lot, and then we try to fail fast, and I think that is a good kind of good strategy overall. Whoever has the margins of Avito, I mean, I can only encourage to kind of build more growth teams, but I think very few have.
Avito is crazy. I like them, but they don't plan to invest or buy any startups in Russia, because their shareholders want to get as much money from Avito right now as possible. So, Florian.
Avito is great.
Avito is great.
I sold them one of best assets, so in Russia.
Yeah, cool. No, it's a good business.
Yeah. Florian, thank you very much.
Well, thanks guys.
It was a really cool discussion, and I hope you stay with us today to talk a bit more in the informal.
I think I need to leave in half an hour, but I can. But in the evening, I think I see you guys then.
Yeah.
Somewhere. I don't know what your plans are. But
we'll be somewhere in Marbella, so
yeah.
Rita will connect us, so you could.
Sure.
You and Katya could join us for.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
We'll do that.
Ребят, 20 минут перерыв. 15. Ну, блин, все равно 20 минут. Потом дальше. Yeah, we have to meet actually. I started on-demand delivery in the UK. Also, like, it's critical South Union economics. We're pretty good at dollars. We didn't even have to exit if we wanted. We did exit the company to help people. What's called Chain. It was in the UK. Competing directly against Deliveroo, and then
Just Eat.
Just Eat.
Yeah, I used to have fooding, which was taken over by and maybe
not so great.
Not so great at all.
I think
I didn't invest in Austria, whatever. And they took over.
Because I mean, Mali's
I never met the founder is This is why our share is
the war with Deliveroo was insane. I mean, they used to call our drivers all the time so they would go into their office and then offer them sign-up bonus.
Yeah.
You leave our company and come here.
It's so competitive, and the guys had so much.
But still, I invested for the last 2 years. 2 years.
Okay.
And post doing it.
Okay.
Second is already breaking.
И немножко понятно.
Restaurant Cheetah, they deliver food, but like from office depot to restaurant, where they grow like
it's like what Volodya was trying to do in Russia.
Yeah, food just started. We already twice passed it.
Well, and I think they're. I wouldn't consider that.
Yeah, no, we consider it as both team, but both times we became
He's a great guy. I think the business is super tough in Russia. It's like, you know, very.
Look, I invested in product exchange, which is also grow product. They grow. I invested 5 million now. Today 30. I dream to sell. I dream to sell. I push them. I tell, okay, you grow. I sell in the account. So it is.
Food is I mean, just I love food. I mean, it's just so relevant to people. Then the economics behind it are really.
We started selling earlier, and then I'm originally from Spain, so I know the guy from Boston here. And we talked about food sector. We have some slides. I will go from 70% across 30%. And now they're raising up like 1.5.
So many coincidences, so much luck needed. I mean, of course, you can be a smart investor and you can reduce.
Now, sometimes you go like I invested. I remember how many but because so I feel like I should do something. And the guys from Sweden West, they like kind of let's do together. Don't mistake.
Magnus is a good friend. Magnus is great.
Similar companies. So we do